Cool. Cool. Well, so this is Sid, and I'm Steven from pmlesson.com, and we're about to start the live mock interview. Before we jump into the interview, Sid, can you just give the audience a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a current rising junior at Vanderbilt. I spent this last summer at a seed stage startup. So it was a really small group of just six of us. It was a lot of fun. And then I spent the summer before that doing software engineering at like a business intelligence firm called MicroStrategy.
Cool. And Sid, one last question. Like, what are you looking for with product management roles, or what are your aspirations or dreams?
Sure. So from what I've heard, I've found that like product management roles are very difficult to jump into right out of school. And at least looking back at the experiences I've had in this past summer at the small startup and then the summer before that at the like bigger enterprise, I thought about things like what do I and do I not like about like software engineering? Do I and do not like about marketing? Like and just the different like options I got to try. And I figured product management was the best way for me to see like an end to end experience of like how do I take a product from ideation to like to sales.
Cool. Okay, cool. Awesome. So Sid, we're going to start off, and for the audience as well, we're going to start off with a mock interview question, and then we'll kind of walk through it a little bit, and then we'll go to feedback at the end. So again, please comment and ask questions or participate in this video if you're interested. So Sid, the question that we'll start off with is the classic PM interview question that is asked at pretty much every PM interview. What is your favorite product and why?
Great. So my favorite product is Slack. So until using Slack, I never understood why people raved about it. I mean, I didn't understand how it could be different from any other chat application. They all seemed the same to me. So the only difference to me was the one that my friends were on at the time. Since my internship finished, I've unsuccessfully tried to get my friends to convert our personal chats to the application because I'm a true believer of the product as a whole. Now here's why. So the first of that, I have three reasons. The first of those is reimagined notifications. So I can't be the only person in the past who's been bothered by the fact that when I walk away from a group message for a couple hours, I'm bombarded with so many messages that I decide to look at none of them. I mean, there's just too many to possibly go through. So I think this might be a function of the KPIs that like Facebook has or like GroupMe has, where they're trying to keep you on the platform as long as possible to serve you ads or for God knows what. But they want to know, like their goal is to notify you every time that they send you a message because they want you back on that platform. Versus Slack serves as a tool for you to be as productive as possible, so they only notify you when it's necessary. And I found that very interesting. So I'll only get notified when someone does the @here sign or if someone types my name at something. That's the only time that I get a notification. But beyond that, if it's not like necessary for myself to see it, I can see it at any time in the future, but I'm not going to get a notification saying, hey, you should see this right now. Another thing I found very interesting was the access to like old and like what some might call like irrelevant messages. So like if I was like a marketer, I could see what the software engineers were working on. I could see what the salespeople were working on. Because of the channel-based system. So I never thought this would be important until I started my last internship, where the first thing I was given was my Slack account. And anytime I had any downtime during the first couple of days, I started going through some old channels, and I was able to see like not only how people interacted, but also what the goals were for the next couple of weeks and what everyone was working on without anyone having to come and bring me up to speed. So I found this very interesting to see what the entire company was working on. I mean, as a 6-person team, it wasn't difficult to see what the company was working on. But as a 600-person team, it gives you insight into the organization without someone having to walk you through every step. Additionally, I found the developer community behind Slack very interesting. Like it's a big factor in the stickiness behind the product. Like it sort of became our team's go-to hub to see like any information beyond just our team's communication. So what users have signed up, how much our MRR was, like if any servers have crashed or like any PagerDuty notifications have come in. Like I didn't have to be given any like access to any tools to be able to see any of this information. I was given full trust of our like everything that was happening in the company immediately without having to ask for any permissions.
Cool. Awesome answer, Sid. Great job. It sounds like, the three kind of main things that you loved about Slack is the notification spam avoidance and like really focusing on high priority notifications, getting up to speed really easily for new team members, and then the development community. Cool. And so just to kind of keep going on this, like what do you imagine? Like a lot of these things that you're talking about are related to kind of like the business case. Is that where you see Slack, being really great, or do you see Slack expanding into the personal messaging space? And why or why not would you see Slack doing that?
So that's something I don't like about Slack, where like when I had said I tried to get my friends to start using it, I found that like I found it was impossible because the product was seriously not built for it. Like for me to get my friends to use it, I would have had to create an organization around my friend group, and then like I would not be able to add anyone to it unless I added someone to that organization. So it was just like a wildly painful thing. But this is something I think like in a way, I think it's a pro and con, right? So the fact that I'm not able to reach out to just about everyone, like the fact that I, as an like as a member of my startup, was not able to reach out to anyone else means that no one's able to reach out to me. So if you think about it, right? Like what do I hate about email, right? Because like Slack is a direct competitor to email, right? So I really like the fact that Slack is a closed platform, because anytime I log on to my email, I open up to like 20 irrelevant marketing emails from companies. It becomes a chore to figure out what's important and what's not important. So I just choose not to open up my email unless it's necessary. But like versus Slack as a closed platform, so I'm only able to talk to people in my organization. I know anytime I open it up, it's just going to be messages that are pretty useful for myself.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So I think it sounds like there's a lot of so what are your thoughts if Facebook implemented a system very similar to channels, with development community bots and the 3 points that you kind of mentioned? Could Facebook do this? Like, could they just implement a lot of these features and be successful in their messaging platform?
So that's a great idea, and I think that's like the biggest thing that Slack needs to get done, like needs to do right now. Like that's an area that Slack needs to move in. So the issue with Slack right now is that like if you think about it, the network effects behind Slack are like it spreads like wildfire, like intra-organizationally, but inter-organizationally there's absolutely zero network effect. So like me at Google, for example, like me at Google, if I start using Slack and I get my teammates to use Slack, then like their teammates will use Slack and it grows like wildfire within the organization. But because I at Google am using Slack, no one at Facebook is inherently going to be using Slack, right? So this is something that like Slack needs to focus on right now, which is the inter-organizational communication, right? So how could they do this, right? As I said before, one of the things I dislike about email is the fact that I open it up to tons of marketing emails, right? But inter-organizational like messages can be a good thing, right? So like I, at my tech startup, would want to talk to a ton of other people at different organizations. And this kind of creates that sticky factor where it says like, if every other startup is using it for their communication, there's no spam that's going through it because like it's my name that's tied to everything, right? So it's not like a faceless person that's reaching out to me. But if every other startup is using Slack, for example, I don't have the option to go into Facebook has their own product. I think it's Workplace, right? So I wouldn't be able to go to Facebook Workplace if I'm starting my own startup because every other team member or every other startup is on Slack that I want to communicate with.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I think you have a really great point. I think the network effects. Hey, Sid, are you there? I just wanted to make sure your video.
Yeah, I'm still
okay,
here.
cool. Okay, cool. You were just really still for a little bit. Yeah, I think the network effects are a huge problem for Slack because there's no, Slack has grown kind of basically just from people realizing that this is an amazing tool. The actual product being great. But in terms of network effects, it doesn't really have much going on for it. And I think they're doing a lot of integration work, which as you mentioned earlier about the development communities. There's a lot of stuff going on there where like if I'm using Stripe, maybe that'll promote Slack to me as a way to kind of communicate or plug into that service. So yeah, that's a fantastic point. Okay, and then I guess the other thing that I'm kind of curious about. So we talked a little bit about how Slack might go about kind of updating and improving, and I want to just go back to this question. Maybe this is already your answer for it, but a very common follow-up question to the favorite product question is how would you go about improving this product?
Sure.
So could you just if it is what you just said, that's totally cool. If it's not, just give me a little bit of sense of how would you change Slack if you were in charge of it, and maybe something other than the network effects if that's something that you would rehash too much.
Sure. So sorry, give me 1 second.
For sure. Pro tip for everyone watching.
This one, I think.
Okay.
What is that?
Oh, just a quick pro tip for everyone watching. if you ever need a break in an interview, just drink water. It's like a super great strategy. So if you ever need to like pause to think, just drink a little bit of water. I'm not saying that's what you did, Sid. I'm just totally joking with you, but it is actually a strategy that is pretty good.
Right.
Go ahead with your answer, Sid.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is interorganizational communication because there's a huge sticky factor to it. But another thing I've like grown to dislike with Slack, and I'd say this is like true of any like messaging system that at least I've used, is the fact that like, or is the thought process that all ideas are ephemeral. So like, it's very difficult to make decisions over Slack because anytime an idea is brought up, people immediately start discussing it. But it's impossible for anyone to come in after the fact, a couple hours later, and rehash that idea out. So I think that like this is a very difficult problem to solve. Like no solution has solved it, and it's a function of the fact that Slack is asynchronous. Well, it's like asynchronous with quotations, but it causes that online, like you always need to be online to like react in the discussion. So as a 6-person team, we had the luxury of moving offline. There's a 600 or 6,000 person team, like you might not. So I have 2 ideas here. The first is that like I've read this quote about Jeff Bezos where he forces like if you ever want to make change within his organization, you have to write a 4-page paper on what you want to change and what you hope the desired outcome is. And then everyone's given a period of time to comment on it and then talk about what they think about it. So I think a similar system could be implemented in Slack where, like, as I said, one of the things I dislike is the fact that all ideas are short-lived. Like they immediately get shot up the moment people start discussing them. But if someone just posted an outline of what they want to happen and what they hope the expected outcome for that is, and everyone can comment on that, but no one's able to see the comments that anyone else gives for a set period of time. So it gives everyone the time to think through it, and then ideas are voted on. I think that could be very interesting because it gives the opportunity for everyone to discuss an idea without being forced to do it within like 6 minutes. Because like at least I feel like when I'm rushed to think of an idea within a couple minutes, I feel like I come up with poorer ideas than if I'm given 4 hours and some alone time.
Unfortunately, for product managers in interviews, do have to come up with ideas in 6 minutes sometimes. But yeah, I totally agree with you. In practice, it's not good to force idea generation within a short time frame because it prevents the ability to kind of think and process these ideas. So just to understand go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I get why it has to be done in product management interviews, but like in the real world, the company is hoping for the best possible outcome. Like they don't care if it takes 4 minutes or 4 hours because that's like still an irrelevant time to an organization. Like if you just give the person a couple hours. So like I think in practice, I think this would be like a very effective way of making sure the best possible idea happens within the organization.
Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about the feature? Let's like talk about it a little bit more. So you're imagining. So can you walk me through, I guess, like the use case you're imagining? So like from beginning. So let's say I post some message, and what happens after that? Like what exactly?
Sure.
happens?
So it wouldn't necessarily be a standard message, right? Like this could be another like tab called. It could be like a sub channel called ideas or something of that sort. But like people get notified saying, "Hey, here's this idea that like Stephen has come up with," and it's like just a long list of, "Hey, here's what I think. Here's what I want to happen. Here's how it should happen. Here's the changes. Like here's what I hope would happen to it." And anyone's able to just like kind of Google Docs comment on it and say, "This is what I think." So everyone else is able to write up what they what they agree with, what they disagree with. They're able to vote on the idea, but no one's able to see what everyone else has done. I mean, it's kind of the thought process behind like the CEO should be the last person to stand up and say what they think about the product because like most of the people will just follow the CEO's thought process. So like if I'm an influential member of the organization and I like give it my thumbs up, other people might just follow what I say and give it that thumbs up as well, right? So like no one's able to see other people's comments for 4 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours. Like I mean these should all be A/B tested, but like for a specific set of time until after that time period where everyone's thoughts become open to the public. Now, people can vote on my ideas, they can vote on your ideas, they can vote on another coworker's ideas, and ideally, good ideas flow to the top, bad ideas flow to the bottom.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Hold on, just updating.
Does that make any
banner
sense?
at the bottom. Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like we're gonna have a voting system basically that. And kind of the key principle here is that we want to get the team to understand and agree on a decision or an idea without having too much like too much influence from certain company members. And the idea is that, this is a common use case in Slack, is that like these ideas are brought up, but then are not handled well in the Slack platform as of now. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Anything I'm
Yeah,
missing?
it's the idea behind bottom up management versus down up management versus top down management.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So why don't we've been chatting for about 20 minutes, so we can kind of pause here. Again, if folks have questions, feel free to comment below. This is the pmlesson.com live mock interview, and this is the favorite product question. Sid is with me, and we have just started talking about Slack. So, now I'm going to kind of transition to feedback and talking a little bit about the answer. So overall, Sid, like, awesome job. Clearly you use this product. Clearly it's a product that you have a lot of opinions about, and you have already thought about things. So it's a great, like, I would totally recommend most people interviewing for product management roles to practice this question, to actually start thinking about points that they'd make. One slight adjustment to your first answer that would like make it even better, in my opinion, would just be if you enumerated your points. It's really simple. So in the beginning, you said you basically made 3 points, right? You did notifications, up to speed, and development community. Just say 1, 2, 3, like, or just like go through them kind of and enumerate them, and just say like, okay, there's 3 things I think Slack is really great for. 1 is that it notifies me at the right time. 2 is that it helps get new members up to speed, and 3, the development community. So number 1, notifications, and then kind of like go into that. The reason it sounds like overdoing it sometimes, or it sounds like too mechanical. And I would actually go so as far as to like write on the whiteboard, or to like maybe like make little markings on the whiteboard when you make your points. Just because interviewers are generally really busy and they don't pay attention as much, and it always helps to like hammer your point in and just be like 1, 2, 3, and maybe you don't have to do it like too much, but just give a little bit more signposting and enumeration throughout your answer. Does that make sense?
That does.
Yeah, and I think maybe the reason that I think it's particularly useful for you is that this is something that I like, and I have this problem too. You're a really fast speaker. So for some people, that's great, and you're kind of like speeding through your answer and giving me a lot of rich content fast. But for some people, it can be like a truck coming at them, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what he said, and I missed something. So I would, or maybe they like looked at a notification on their computer while you were talking or something, and they missed everything that you just said. So I would reiterate more and try a little bit to speak a little slower. It often happens when like people are nervous, or like they're in an interview, that they end up speaking faster than they already would have. So it's always just good, like when you're public speaking, or speaking in an interview, just slow yourself down a little bit, and be aware that you might have that problem. So those are the main things I had about like kind of structure and such. I would say that you did a great job with the actual items. I think you could have in the beginning. So I think notifications is great. I would talk a little bit more if you can. This is like kind of taking you from like an APM level to like a higher PM level. Talk a little bit more about theory, or kind of like philosophy behind these principles that you're talking about. So notifications is a fantastic point to bring up, but there's a lot of discussion, a lot of different platforms that deal with like high priority notifications versus low priority notifications, and understanding what those are and how to like message those, and what the UI affordances are. Like, Slack still notifies you about things if they're not high priority, but they just put a red badge in your app, for example. So I think it's worth having a little bit of discussion about push and pull notifications, and the various like notification systems. And I'm going to give you a lot of rich content, and I don't think that you should put everything that I'm saying into your answer, but just to add a little bit of flavor and a little bit more depth to your answer by kind of mentioning some of these like higher order topics about Slack. So yeah, with notifications, that would be one thing to mention, is just like this principle of, Slack is great at giving me high priority notifications. And the reason a system needs to do this is because if it stops giving me high priority notifications, I no longer trust that system. And I no longer will that system no longer guarantees that there's useful information there. And Facebook is a great example of someone who has really low priority notifications, because every time I log into Facebook, I have a red badge, and half the time it's them promoting an ad, or half the time it's like some random friend that I don't even care about posting some picture. So it is actually really important to have a high priority notification system. Otherwise, you just end up becoming a news feed in your notification tab. So Yeah, that could be one way to like kind of frame that answer a little bit.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I wonder if that's something Facebook A/B tested. Like, because I often like have like 10 notifications and like all 10 of them are just like absolutely useless. So maybe it just makes people feel better when there's just like tons of notifications sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, that could be an interesting thing to talk about. It's like the whole psychology experiment with the rat pulling the lever and it randomly gets rewards and it still feels, it still pushes the lever just as much, even if it's a random
Yeah.
reward as opposed to like a reliable reward. Um, I would say that like that's insidious of the company, and maybe that's like as a product manager, you're responsible for the ethics of the company's design, and that's like something not to do. If that decision was made purely on a metric basis, it seems like it was a selfish decision, not considering the user,
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's also totally something interesting to bring up in your interview at some point. And I think there's been a lot of like recent news about kind of how irresponsible these companies have been with regards to notifying us. I just wanted to give like another way to kind of add flavor to your questions a little more depth, and like basically you're operating well. You're like giving me a good synopsis of like why up to speed is good. You gave me a good anecdote, but you can always relate it to something a little bit more. So for example, there's a huge monetary cost involved with updating employees, right? Like if a new employee comes on board and it takes them like 2 weeks to get up to like running and to actually start using our tools, that is a large cost to the company. So if Slack could promise like this idea that like, yeah, when users join us, they can like really get up to speed quickly, that has a financial incentive for the company. So that's like a huge deal, right? So yeah, that's maybe one way to like frame why that's such an awesome feature or why that's so good for Slack. Is like, yeah, Slack is literally saving companies money by helping employees get to what they need to do faster.
Hmm.
So yeah, another way to kind of show that there's an impact here. It's kind of like on your resume statement, like when you like add the impact part of it. Okay, cool. So that was my main points in the first section. Was just like I thought you had so overall killer answer, great job. Like I don't think there's anything you really need to change, but these are just ways to accentuate it and make it even more rich and profound. Because with this question, you really want to impress me and show me something that I don't already know. Like tell me something I don't know.
Hmm.
In terms of the improvement section, I thought you did well. I think, we talked about this feature. I think it's, and we kind of like jumped into it. If you actually were in an interview, you should whiteboard, you should whiteboard that and actually draw it up and what it looks like because it'll be much clearer to me. Um, I will say it's a little dangerous to like suggest a specific feature in this section. We talked a little bit about like how it should be better with like intercompany networking. And I think that's a great point, and that's awesome. And you had that point. You might have brought that up if I had asked that question right off the bat. But in this case, it's better in these sorts of questions to kind of give a sense of like the overall area that you're interested in improving, as opposed to like a specific product feature that you think will fix that problem. Because like I'm asking you, kind of like how would you improve it? So yeah, I would recommend just pausing a little bit before you jump into an actual specific solution. Talk a little bit more about ideas. Talk about like why this is such an important problem for Slack, like how this will really help companies grow. Because I'm not quite asking you like a specific feature yet. I'm
Yeah.
asking you more of a general overview of like what is going on with Slack and why we should prioritize this. And once we agree that this is a pain point, once we agree that this is really important, maybe I'll follow up with you and ask you about how you'd fix that problem.
Hmm.
But until then, just give me kind of an overall perspective.
So
And
can I
and
ask a question? Is that question meant to kind of probe me on what do I think, like where do I think the organization can improve? Or is it trying to like, so it's not trying to see what I would do to fix it. Like it's just where I see pain points.
so it's where you see pain points, and then it's like kind of um, areas that you would focus on. Like for example, you could say
Hmm.
that like intercompany networking is something we should focus on. That's fine. That's not a feature. I'm not like saying exactly like the thing that we should do. And maybe you can name some ideas. But in this question, I felt like you had a specific product in mind that you wanted to make, and it kind of detracted from your overall points about Slack and understanding of Slack. And then, an interviewer might then switch to evaluating you on that product, on like what you're proposing, even though it might like not be that deeply thought out, and you want the interviewer to assess you on your insights, your product insights into Slack overall, not on like this specific product. Because like maybe you suggest this thing and the interviewer is like, this doesn't seem like a good product, but you still had really good insights. You still had like really good points to make in the beginning and overall. But then the interviewer will have this bad taste in their mouth because of this like product that you suggested that didn't really fit the bill. So I would definitely like stay at a higher level for that question until the interviewer asks you to go down the level. I did eventually ask you. We played around with it, but I'm just saying that like in general, try to stay at a higher level. Try to give overall suggestions about areas that you would improve Slack or take it in the next 5 years.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think I spoke for too long before like bringing you back into the conversation? What I mean by that is like, so you asked me like, what's your favorite product? And do you think I like should have gone on, stated all my points, and then you come back in, or kind of make it a back and forth?
So yeah, that's a great question, and I think a lot of PM interviewees have this problem about like timing. So there's no right answer. I would say that for any given amount of time, you should not be going on for more than like 2 minutes without some kind of nod or acknowledgement or eye contact from the interviewer. So if the interviewer is not giving you a signal, you should not be continuing to talk. And what you should do is there's two ways. Are you a computer science major, Sid?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for the computer science people out there, there's kind of like it's like a networking when you can have like a passive or active like ping back from the interviewer, or like, it's kind of like a push-pull system. So you can actually you can say like, hey, like I'm gonna keep going on to this section. I just finished my point one. Now I'm going on to point two. Let me know if there's any issues with that. And you're requesting a passive, like you're asking the interviewer if they want to interrupt you and to like to guide you, right, by saying that little phrase. But if you want an actual ping from the interviewer, you can say, I'm going to move on to point two. Is that okay with you? And then wait for the interviewer to respond and say yes, and then you go on. And then you're actually getting like a ping back from the interviewer. It's like, okay, cool. Like the interviewer is like listening. The interviewer is okay with where I'm going, et cetera, et cetera. So I would use those liberally throughout your interview answers, maybe every 2 minutes or so. I personally tend to use the passive ones more because I have a sense for like how I would go about the question. But if you're really unsure or you're feeling really unclear, just like end to the point that you're making and then ask the interviewer, be like, okay, now I'm going to move on here. Does that sound all right to you? You know, and it's like just casual, and the interviewer just nod or something. Don't do it too much, or those interviewers going to be like, oh God, like just do it, you know. But I would say those are good strategies to sprinkle in your answers that you avoid that problem.
Great, I appreciate that.
Cool. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. We are pretty much done with the session. We'll kick it to questions. So if you're watching, please comment below with any questions you have about this interview, about Slack, or just about PM prep interviewing in general. We already have one question that we'll get to in a moment. Again, this is a PM lesson.com live interview session where we interview people live on Facebook Live. I just said live 3 times. We interview people on Facebook Live for mock interviews as an educational tool for folks out there like you, as well as people who are looking to get some extra practice. You can visit more PM interview prep tools at pmlesson.com. We are taking questions right now. If you would like to ask any questions, you're more than encouraged to ask questions. I know that some of you guys are watching. Cool. So yeah, any other things you want to talk about the interview, Sid? Any other questions you had? Overall, I really do think you did an excellent job with the interview question. You've clearly thought about the product well. Other things that might be worth mentioning kind of as like competitors to Slack, like Facebook. I've kind of brought that up with you in the interview, but like, why couldn't Facebook do this? Or, other platforms that might be similar
was
to
the answer
Slack
about
or,
interorganizational communication not sufficient? That's not me.
no,
That's
that was
like
awesome.
me just genuinely wondering. Okay.
No, that was an awesome answer. All I was saying is that, this may or may not come up, but generally it's always good to like be aware of competitors really clearly in these favorite product questions. If you're doing Slack, like it's really critical that you know it's competitors, because the interviewer may ask you like, oh, why is Slack better than blank? and then you should have a clear answer. You had an excellent answer to Facebook, but there are other platforms out there that maybe do channeling, that maybe also do have a good development community as well. Why is email not good? And have some concrete things to say about why email is not a viable competitor to Slack. And there's plenty you can say there, but the point that I'm just trying to say is make sure you intimately know the competitors. Sorry, I cut you out. What's up, Sid?
That makes sense.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, so we have a couple questions that we want to get to, and Sid, you can help me answer them if not. So Rulan is asking, sorry I've asked this question before, but hope to get information from others' perspectives. For the 2018 grads, which I don't think you are, you're still in school, but if you've already started working at a software company, does it make sense to apply to Google/Facebook 2019 programs right away? Is it bad to change job after 1 year? So I'll answer this one, Sid, since I don't know if you have direct experience, but the TLDR is that, Rulan, no, it always depends, but I've seen people do this. I've seen people move into a job after 1 year. What's more important is that you apply early. You can always get in the system, and maybe, if it's not the right fit for you right now, they'll tell you to kick it to the next year. But the answer to your question is that, yes, you should apply. If you are looking to switch jobs, and it's okay to work at a job for 1 year, especially out of new grad, you're still figuring things out. So the answer is yes, you should apply right away, in my opinion. Cool. We have 2 questions from Ked. One common question that gets asked during PM interviews is, how do you build a roadmap? Okay, so we have 2 questions. One is, how do you build a product roadmap? And the second question is, how do you prioritize short-term versus long-term planning in that roadmap? Sid, do you want to take a stab at how you would think about building a product roadmap? And I can kind of chip in as well. I would say that, from just to start off with, Ken, this question is kind of vague. Product roadmap, there's no such product roadmaps take many different forms and could be at many different levels of specificity. So it's not really clear what the interviewer is asking. So the first thing that I would actually ask is, what exactly is in this product roadmap, or what would I see in this product roadmap before actually diving into an answer? So that's my first take. Sid, do you have anything you maybe wanted to mention? No worries, no rush or pressure or anything. We're just kind of chatting about the questions.
Sure. Yeah. If it were me, I think I'd think through what's important to the product, right? So it's kind of like the idea of maybe less so at big companies, but you want to build an MVP and test out your hypothesis of, does your product have viable users before investing a ton of money into it. So you want to stack rank how important are the features to building it, and what features will customers value the most, and then kind of front load those before you end up on later features.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely great approach. I think the other thing I would recommend, Ken, for this question is really understanding the product's goals, right? You're basically, at the end of the day, you need to have the product vision laid out, and that's kind of what you're getting at here a little bit, Sid, too. Just understanding the product better, and I think you really need to know what are the overall principles and vision of this product. So let's say it's YouTube that we're talking about, and I'm talking about how I would build a YouTube roadmap. I need to know what YouTube's goals are for the year. So maybe it's watch time, and then therefore I'll be prioritizing the short-term features depending on easy wins in the beginning, or things that will help validate assumptions that we've made, and then long-term planning are kind of the larger features that we think will be really impactful, but we would need to use these short-term features to validate that. But overall, where are we going? Why are we building this thing? How are we defining this roadmap? It's based on what our goals are for the year. And we can talk a lot more about this, so I won't be able to get into it too much, but hopefully that answers your question. And if not, feel free to comment again, Ken. We are with you here on this channel. Cool. So that pretty much ends the session. Thanks, Sid, so much for joining us. This is kind of an experimental thing we're doing, and this is your 3rd one so far, but so far we're getting better and better each time, I think. Not the interviewees. I'm sorry. I'm just saying we as a system are getting better. Our quality is getting better, and we're understanding how to do these effectively. But yeah, great job with the interview. You did a fantastic job. Good luck with your job search. And for those of you watching, again, please visit pmlesson.com for more free course information, access to our Slack channel where we have a ton of information. And what I've been telling people lately is that at the end of the day, the best thing that prepares you from PM interviews is practice. And PM Lesson is hoping to give you exactly that by interactive questions, like community access and direct access to former Google PMs, etc. Cool. Well, that's it. Thanks, Sid, for joining us today. And you did a great job.
Great. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the help.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to end the broadcast now. Thanks, Facebook Live viewers, for joining us.